Hey, Vinny Melkus Outdoors. I'm out here on the road again, but I was going to do like a series of theories and finesse fishing, so that's what we're going to do. And so if you like, subscribe, or just subscribe, that's fine. I'm trying to build the subscriber base. But anyway, so my first one, it's come to me, after thinking about the passing of Aaron Martins, was drop shot fishing and leader length, and how that's actually evolved with the forward-facing sonar. But anyway, I'll get into this. So here's my school of thought, and there's going to be the people who disagree with it, but this seems to always be effective for me. And I remember hearing Aaron Martins talk about his leader length theories, and I can't quite remember exactly what he was saying, but I remember mine is kind of based off of his theory. But I've kind of I think I've more simplified it, because he's super in the detail, which is awesome. He's always been that way, which is makes him who he was, who he is. But anyway, so my theory, because we know the drop shot is one of the most prevalent techniques now, but it's one of the most effective techniques day in and day out, year after year. It seems to just it wasn't one of those fad techniques that came through. It's persisted through the years, and I've used it from one coast to the other, from one border to the other border. It's just one of those techniques that I always have tied on. Now, I think there's some places where the fish actually kind of get educated to that, and that's why we go over leader length and how we actually fish it. But overall, you can take that thing anywhere and catch fish. You can drop shot pretty much anywhere as well. I've even used a drop shot, or they call it a bubba shot or whatever, to flip grass. And I guess you could say the Tokyo rig is kind of a play off of that, like a real short leadered drop shot. And then I've also used long leaders in 80, 90 foot of water. So I've done a lot. I mean, well, everybody's done a lot with the drop shot. Your imagination. I've taken a drop shot. Here's another thing. I've taken a drop shot, tossed the weight on the ground, on the bank, and dangled the lure on the water and caught fish. And frogs. Frogs is a good way to catch a frog. Okay, so the first thing I look at, let's start with the springtime. And I'm not talking about early spring when the water temperature is still in the low 50s. I'm talking about where it's starting to get where there's a full push onto the bank. You might even have where it might be into the second wave, we'll call it. We'll start there. That's because I'm going to make it around the whole year. But anyway, so that spring, after the fish are pushed up, you have some bed fish. I got two schools of thought on that. So if I'm bed fishing, I tend to like the shorter, like a 6-inch leader. That just for whatever reason, depending on what depth they're in. But so I'll default. Let me give you my default first. I know I'm backtracking. So my default length is where I have a St. Croix 6'9" medium light, Legend Elite. That's my drop shot rod. So, but typically the handles are going to be about the same length in most of the rods. I mean, it's going to vary a little bit. But I take where the hook is, which is above the reel seat, and I take that and I run my line, my excess leader line, down to the end of the butt. That's my go-to default. That's always been that way. That's if I don't have any idea what's going on in the lake, I'll default to that length and I'll adjust from there. But okay, now go back to that spawning scenario. Super shallow spawners, 6-inch. Regular clear water. We can see spawning down in the 10 feet. Then I go to that default mode, that default length. In the spring, when the water temperature is above, when we're in the 60s, there's, like I said, hard first wave, second wave of spawners. That's what I'm using, and I use that going into the summertime. And one of the reasons is one, when they're spawning, it's good to have something suspended over the bed, and you can let it drop in there like it's something messing around with the eggs. Two, when I get post spawn and we get it pushing into the summer, the fish get a little more active. Granted, right after post spawn, there's a little rest period there. but they're not all resting. Some of them are going to be pushed into that, okay, now it's time to feed up. The metabolism of the fish is starting to really increase, and they need to feed, and they're starting to become more active. So as we get into summer, that's what happens, early summer. So therefore, I like to have that long leader length to give that little bit more action, as though the bait fish too, their metabolism is increasing and they're moving around and doing things as well. So going into the summer months, with most people, especially in the South, for some reason, in the South, those fish pull off, and people, like, I've talked to a lot of guys around here, and I've seen into some of the tournaments, there's a funk. I actually don't think that's the so, because their metabolism is still there. They're just pushed off in the different areas, whether it be ledges, deep water, there's little deep water huts, or they're chasing bait or whatnot. And so where you were early summer when you're following them out, you just sometimes miss them, and you might get ones or twos that are lagging or that are moving back, because there's always fish that are going to maintain those areas, even spawning areas, as residents. So that seems to me to be that case. And sometimes those fish just bite funky because you've had a huge drain of nutrients from the body. Some of them have weak bone structure, especially around the mouth area. So you couple all those together, and you have whatever the little summer funk, but they're still there. They're usually some places they school up, other places they get off on these deep drops, and they're not necessarily school up to be like wolf packed. But whatever the case may be, they're a little more active, and therefore I like to have that longer leader because I can play around with it. Now, as we go into the fall, I do the same thing, because a lot of times the bait fish are suspended in various areas, and they are balled up and they're starting to move in the bags. I will start with my default and erring on the side of the longer one, because the fish are very active. They're trying to bulk up real quick, so I like to have that longer leader, just because it gives the bait, you can give the bait a lot more action, or move it around, or let it die. And letting it die kind of looks like it's one of those bait fish that got knocked around in the school. This is particularly effective if you have stripers around. So because stripers are notorious for just tearing up schools of shad, and you have dying shad that are falling out of the school, and the bass just sit there and grab them. So if you have a longer leader, and I guess I didn't preface the longer leader, I'm talking 18 inches, 2 foot. I mean, if you're really ambitious, maybe beyond, but a huge longer leader, in my opinion, because most people run it 12 to, maybe you go to 18, but I'm talking about excess, like 2 foot, like huge leaders. You can work your way up there. Like I said, my default is pretty much like a 12 to 16 inch leader from my handle. Anyway, so then you go into wintertime. This is when things get a little different. So this is when I really shorten up the leader to about that 6 inch, maybe even shorter. And it depends on the weather conditions in the wintertime. So once those fish after late fall, and they start pulling off into their winter areas, or they start sucking down on the bottom, if you have some of those real nasty cold fronts. Sometimes, guys say they suspend a lot. They do suspend once they're in a certain level of the water column, but there's a lot of fish that are up, especially what's called clear water shallow, which is 10 foot and shallower. What happens is sometimes they'll just suck to the bottom, and they even do that in some of these some reservoirs or lakes or rivers, even in deeper water. They'll suck to the bottom for a little bit while there's that turbulent barometric pressure, the whatever front's coming through. And that short leader you can really get in front of, because you're gonna have to get it right in front of their face. That short leader actually puts that bait right on a fish's face when he is on the bottom. And then and then also, I like to keep it short anyway, even if they're suspended fish, because most of the time you get these suspended winter fish, and they're not just suspended, a foot off the bottom, because that's just normal bass behavior or fish behavior, sitting up off the bottom a foot or something. But we're talking about mid-column suspended fish, and that is counterintuitive. But you're not gonna. But what it does is you kind of swim that drop shot through that school, or if you're above them, you drop it on them. Now so I went through those scenarios just briefly. I didn't, I want to keep this short, so I want to wave top in a little bit, just give you something to think about. But now let's take in forward-facing sonar on this. And this kind of changes that game too, and impacts how you pick your leader and drop shot. And what I mean, and what I'm specifically referring to, let's take that winter scenario. You actually want that weight tight to that bait, like 6 inches. And the reason being is because it's going to give you a better return on that. And this goes in the summertime too. Like I said, you want it long leader in the summertime. Well, not if you're, I mean, you can still see your bait on forward-facing sonar, even with that big leader. But it's easier to see your bait when you have it at about six inches, maybe even less on the leader, because it's just it gives a better sonar return, and therefore you can actually see the bait and the fish's reaction a little bit, or see your bait sooner, see the fish's reaction to it, and if you're using that, you can also put that where you need to put it. So in the wintertime, and then some of those specific forward-facing sonar situations, I like that tight leader, or I'll go with my default and then maybe tighten it up. That if I'm having problems getting a good solid return and being able to see it, because some places you might have a lot of structure on there, or might be a lot of fish, might be a little tougher to see your bait with that pan optics, or whatever live target, or whatever hummingbirds is. But if you tighten that lure up and that weight, you can start. It will give you a better return on the sonar, and you'll be able to see where your bait is a little bit easier. So that's a scenario where I kind of axe out all those water temp and seasonal transitions and just do it that way. But I'm not always using forward-facing sonar like everybody assumes that. But because drop shot fishing, sometimes I'm flipping and pitching it. Sometimes I'm just casting, because a lot of out west, especially with large boulder fields, sometimes you can't see the fish if they're super tight on those or in shadows. You can't see the fish with forward-facing sonar. So if you get on something like that, I'm not necessarily utilizing it. I use it for other things even when I'm doing that, but maybe not even fish. Maybe I'm looking for other life around there. But that's a whole nother topic. But that's my quick rundown on like theories of finesse fishing, drop shot leaders. And I'm sure you got your own rules of thumb from experience. But these ones have worked for me day in and day out. If I want to go catch fish just for fun, or in tournaments, if I really need to get that key fish, is I'll start baselining with these rules, or these not even rules, they're basic theories on where to start. Anyway, like I said, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.